Al.
Was that this morning?
Last night I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, we're going to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education. Dr. Smith informs me that the budget assumptions and goals aren't quite ready yet, so if there's a motion, I'd like to amend the agenda to table the budget assumptions and goals, and we'll move that to next week's agenda. So is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then the agenda is revised. Do we have to approve the agenda now?
Yeah.
Okay. With that addition, with that change, is there a motion to approve the revised agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. At this time, are there any members of the public who would like to come up and offer any comments? Seeing no one, we'll move ahead, and there will be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting for public to offer comments. Consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Board Chair's report. I have a short statement. Last Saturday, as we went about our busy routines, news outlets started to report about a shooting in Pittsburgh. As the details became clearer and we learned the full scope of the tragedy that took place in the Tree of Light Synagogue, we were saddened, horrified, and angered that yet another mass shooting had taken place. But because this one targeted the Jewish community, it was especially egregious. Earlier today, Superintendent Smith issued a heartfelt statement about the shooting and detailed some of the good work underway across the Wilton Public Schools to help educate our students about the Holocaust and about the fact that anti-Semitism still exists in our country. Dr. Smith will speak more about this in a minute, but I just wanted to take a moment to express, on behalf of the Board of Education, our strong support for these district-wide initiatives and to playing whatever part we can in standing strong in support of our Jewish students and their families. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. In the note, I'd love to, if you hadn't had a chance to take a look at it, there's one at your place you can take with you when you go. So I received an invitation early Sunday morning to attend an event in Westport at a synagogue. And so there were a number of members of that synagogue and local synagogues, as well as members of other faith communities from across Fairfield County. And it was really, though people really gathered in grief, it was also a very strong testament to the power of community and the need to come together, certainly in times like these, and to serve it as a bright light for others. I happen to have my 9-year-old son Liam with me, and so as I was leaving and we were in the car, his question was, why did they get killed? And it was really a hard one to respond to. We talk about all kinds of things, and I found myself really struggling to explain why people hate. Where does it come from? And so, I think I clumsily got through that with him with a promise to have a better explanation going forward. But it also took me back to the work that we do here as a school system and commitments we've made in the past and some issues that we've had in our own community. And I think, first and foremost, the need to really stand up and be very clear about what we won't tolerate, and then beyond that, our commitments to improvement. And so I tried to detail in that letter to all of you, to the rest of the community, some of the work that's underway. And I'll just summarize some of that for you so you have it fresh in your minds. Kim Zemo has been working with a group of students with the Anti-Defamation League, and all of our sophomores in December will participate in their Names Can Really Hurt Us program, which is a renowned program that they run, very powerful, and we expect that it'll be very powerful for our students. There's another organization called Facing History and Ourselves that has been recommended for many years. We have a group of staff at Middlebrook who I think will wind up spending upwards of 30 hours in training with them online as they seek to deepen their own understanding of how to teach about the Holocaust and put together units of study that are really impactful. Tomorrow we canceled our administrative team meeting. It was an opportunity that came up to travel to Cass in Cheshire, so a group of us can participate in a presentation on what they're entitling the December dilemma. And if you think back to recent history, we run into insensitivity issues here all the time. So we're looking to get some more information, some strategies to help equip our folks to better respond to the diversity here in our community. And then next Tuesday, we've got another team that will be spending the day with the Anti-Defamation League in their Echoes and Reflections program. Beyond that, we invited Dr. Bill Howe, who is a multicultural expert here in the state of Connecticut, to come in and just to initiate work with us by auditing all of our policies and ensuring that our policies are aligned and have the kinds of inclusive statements that we are committed to. And then I think just the last piece is that Kim will continue to work with the committee that we formed, the community committee that we formed last week, and she's got some good plans in place. So I think the summary statement there is we are concerned, we are committed, we know we have a lot of work to do, but we are engaged in that work and moving forward.
Thank you. What was Dr. Howe's assessment?
I have not seen his summary
He's gonna
report.
get back to you.
We have
Okay.
more work to do.
Yeah. Is that it?
That's it.
That's your report?
Thanks. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Committee reports. Business
Ops will meet next week.
Okay,
Okay, we haven't met since our last meeting, so next week will be our next meeting. They're
Okay.
primarily centered around budget. Budget discussion.
great. Do you have anything to add, Debbie?
And just that I want to sort of sneak in under committee reports and talk about the day I had with Dr. Smith and members of the team from Wilton administrators and a lot of Library Learning Commons folks as well. We went to Rye to hear Heidi Hayes Jacobs and Ben Akalik, whose names you may not know, but in the education expert, consultant, writers world, they're considered rock stars. So it was a pleasure to be able to, to spend a day with those two and 100 other people from the tri-state area. Districts brought teams. And talking about what the contemporary student looks like and learns, and how he or she learn, and how they're different than perhaps students in prior years and generations. And with an ever-changing world, and technology, exemplifies some of those drastic changes. What do we do as schools? What moves do we need to make sure that we are supporting students in this new evolving, ever-changing learning landscape? So the workshop was called Bold Moves for Schools, which is actually the title of Heidi Hayes Jacobs' book. But there are a lot of sort of good questions and exercises and roadmaps to sort of for teams to work around. And really proud to be with the Wilton folks who are right in the mix, if not ahead of some of the other districts.
Wow.
And so you'll hear that in some of the course proposals tonight.
Right.
So it was an exciting day, and there'll be 5 other days. Looking at different structures to support innovation, looking at different constraints that may make it hard, and what are some workarounds or what makes sense, looking at how to outreach to the community, look at what training the staff needs, look at what sort of systemic work boards of ed should be doing to try to ask the questions and guide the process and garner public understanding and support. So it's a lot of the work we're doing here, when it excites us, that's what they're talking about. And so we will continue down that path and get even better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Teaching and learning.
Teaching and learning, both at our last meeting and we had one this morning.
Right.
We reviewed quite a few 6141 proposals for new courses, all of which will be presented to you tonight. We've already asked them many questions, and I'm sure you'll all have your questions tonight, but I think they're all well prepared to explain it. And I have to say that I really think since we revised or updated the policy a year or so ago, I mean, these 6141s are so thorough and detailed, and those who have come before us to present them are really prepared and know what they're talking about, and it's it's been really quite a joy to work on this committee with that, so.
Right. Well,
Good
the
stuff.
information that we're presented is wonderful.
Yeah, so, and
Yeah.
then you ask questions and they know their stuff, so
They
it's
sure do.
been quite an experience and it's been good. So that's on tonight's, and then we also, Chuck gave us a brief update on the whole ruler program and what that is, and Laura and I, and I'll put this out here to the group, questioned whether or not we should get a more detailed presentation to this board so that we all have a
Oh,
good
yeah.
understanding of that, and/or if we go through the charter, develop, perhaps we want a Board of Ed charter, which is one of the tools in the toolbox for ruler, so something for us to think about, talk about. Perhaps we could have a ruler workshop or something like that for the Board of Ed, so that was part of our discussion, and you're looking at me like, you
Well,
have
no,
no
I'm
idea what I'm
thinking
talking
we have
about, which-
our,
so-
we have our workshop planned for.
the math
um,
coming up.
No, our second
Board
second
Ed.
one, where we're gonna talk about Board of Ed goals.
So
and
that might be a
norms and
perfect thing
things.
to incorporate in that workshop.
Yeah. That's on November 27th,
Right.
which sounds very much like, I hope I didn't schedule that for Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, Thanksgiving's a little earlier this year.
It just sounds like the
Yeah.
day that should be Thanksgiving,
We'll-
so
we'll
if
just
it
bring-
is,
We'll bring turkey sandwiches, bring your leftovers.
I'll bring the pie,
Um,
okay.
so
But
we
yeah, I
can-
think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and, fun stuff, and, great stuff with social emotional learning, and, the whole premise of it is you have to start with the adults. Because you have to have adults with very
Right.
high emotional IQs before you could take it to the students. We also had, help me with her name, the German teacher.
Kirsten.
Thank you. One of our fine German teachers at the high school presented to us that they are, once again, would like to do another Germany trip this summer, as they did back in 2017, which was a great success. And so she overviewed the program to us. And, Laura and I, again, said that this was something, if you recall, we recently had a policy update about traveling abroad and all of that. And so we said, yeah, it's your call. And it's Bob O'Donnell's call at the high school. So they had our support, although we appreciated her coming and giving us an update. And she said that there are some other foreign language teachers who are also considering the same thing in their languages. And of course, we said we'd love to hear about them, but, they already have our permission by way of our policy. So,
I think the revised policy for overseas travel requires board approval by vote.
oh, it did, okay.
Yeah,
So there you go.
that was something that we'd written into that in I think the last revision.
Okay, well, we were a little lax in our understanding of that this morning, so
So that's gonna make its way to us?
I suppose so, if that's
It'll
the
have to,
case.
yeah,
'Cause we gave her a
domestic
go-ahead.
travel.
Oh, that's,
Yes.
I thought you were
Doesn't
telling
require
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
So we gave her a go-ahead this morning, but I suppose we were wrong in doing that, so,
Maybe we could get her onto the agenda.
I'll verify. I'll
next week.
verify the policy, and then
Okay.
we'll
we're
just,
meeting next Thursday again, so we could just stick it on the agenda then.
okay.
I can't imagine that there's a problem.
We didn't see any problem in the presentation.
Yeah.
The itinerary follows very closely to what they did previously.
Yeah.
And she had nothing but success stories to share with us
Great.
about that experience. They had about 7 people. I think she said 7 kids the last time. This time they're hoping to get about 12 or more. So all good stuff there. We did a quick overview of the calendar of meetings coming up. And one question that I had just posed to the group, if you recall, Tony Boucher had put forth legislation that got passed about teaching the Holocaust
Right.
and genocide. And so the question just was to be sure that our curriculum and how we're delivering it meets all those requirements. And we reviewed all that and feel confident that we're up to snuff with all of that. So that was pretty much an overview of our meeting.
Is that effective with this current school year, the new legislation?
yeah, as of July 1.
Okay.
But our curriculum's in line with it and probably goes even above and beyond what the minimum requirements
Great.
are. We
Good.
address it both in the 7th grade social studies curriculum and in our sophomore year history.
Okay.
So 2, I think, age-appropriate times to address it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
No question.
Related, to the world languages and to the German. Do we have sister high schools, like in France, in Germany,
I don't
in
believe-
Japan?
Don't believe so. No.
Is that something that we should talk about pursuing, schools that we could relate with or tie into and communicate with, travel to and from, have students from their school come to us and us go to their school. I will tell you that it is an incredibly effective program.
Well, I would tell you Fran probably has examples of, through the digital,
We do that through art
Yeah.
already. The art show is, we
Right.
have,
true.
Yeah, but I think in World, it is a really remarkable program to do.
okay.
to-
Well, and I would add,
Also have-
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that, one of the things that she shared with us, you know, it's a 2-week itinerary. The second week is where they're actually getting on the bus and they're traveling to different locations and basically being tourists and they're sightseeing and getting a lot of history and that sort of thing. But the first part of it, they're living with German families, so they kind of split up and they live with the German families and they go to the schools because the schools are still in session during the time. Like, this is a June into July trip, but the schools there are still in session. So they go to the schools with the kids, which isn't like a setup here where everything's housed under one building. It's several buildings in the town, and the kids reported that of the entire 2 weeks, that was their favorite part of the trip, was
Oh,
being
wow,
able
that's
to be
great.
with the German families and being in the German schools.
Yeah, I think you establish those relationships through a sister program, and they're ongoing.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I think
Yeah.
it's something we probably, I don't know how we would go about looking at it or talking
Well,
about
why
it.
don't we
or-
talk with the World Language Department? I'm sure they've got some ideas about that.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's something we should pursue. It's a
Okay.
very broadening
What was
experience.
it that you wanted to add?
I think you did a great
Oh,
job
okay.
explaining. There are two other relationships. We have a relationship with a school in Cologne where the students have come over here quite a few times to our high school, and our French teachers have a school that they communicate with, and they have pen pals, and ideally, if we go over to France, that would be an opportunity to visit that school. And
They should come here too.
But this is,
Here.
yeah, we agree, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Gretchen, do you want to give the policy update?
So we met a week ago Tuesday, and we have a couple policies for approval tonight.
Review tonight, right?
And we have a few more that will be coming up for the next meeting that we just had to cross our Ts and dot our Is on.
Administration of medicine. It's just a bear of a policy. Want to get them right,
So-
gotta get them right. Take the extra time. Okay, thank you. Our busy teachers are here tonight. Thank you all. I know, you guys have been here since like 6:30 this morning. New course proposals.
Prepare to be amazed.
One of the favorite nights of the year is getting to
It's so exciting, this,
Yeah.
I think,
course.
this time of year, hearing about what all these good people have planned for us.
We have quite the entourage of highly acclaimed teachers,
For
as you
sure.
said here, for these 6141s. You guys want some?
Thank you for this. Thank you.
You are welcome. That was the attachment. That somehow didn't get to you.
Oh, okay. Oh, she
Should we,
had it done there.
could we do some quick introductions?
She would. That's Fran.
I'm gonna do it,
Just,
yeah.
great.
Right.
So we have an exciting evening here for Wilton High School. Thank you to the entire Board of Ed for considering these course proposals, and to Mrs. Shrem and Mrs. Rothstein for their thoughtful review thus far and their support of the proposals. Just an
We give
intro-
them a hard time sometime, right? You have to say.
Yeah, very thoughtful questions.
Oh, see, he's very,
No,
we
she
push
pushed us
back
hard
quite a
and,
bit.
yeah, it was
Good.
appropriate. Yeah. We appreciate it. As you said, this team is prepared. So the 5 proposals this evening, we have United States history, which will be presented by David Willock. We have data structures and algorithms presented by our math teacher, Christian Willem. Executive functioning for today and beyond, presented by Patty Berkowitz, who is our instructional leader for support services. And then we have a peer leadership helpers course being presented by Kim Zemo and Dan Pompa. And finally, a digital literacy course, the one we presented today, the teaching and learning, presented by Fran Compar. So we're very proud of our teachers and our leaders, and along the lines of a comprehensive and challenging curriculum, I think you're going to see tonight some evidence of some really rigorous coursework that's going to be wonderful for our students and good for our high school. So David will present the first course.
Thank you. So this is the second year of our rollout of our resequenced social studies curriculum. Last year, the freshmen started taking world history. This year, they're taking civics and the contemporary world. And this proposal is to move U.S. history to the junior year. It has been offered to sophomores. This year, there's only one section running in the high school because this is a transition year. So next year, we're expecting all of our current sophomores to be taking either U.S. history or AP U.S. history. I think it's good for our students. If AP doesn't work out, there's a place for them to drop down where they're going to be with their peers rather than in a class of sophomores. So pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Does the state set guidelines for when courses years should be offered, or is this in compliance with state guidelines?
They have some recommended course sequences, but
Yeah.
from my understanding from Steve Armstrong, the ultimate decision is the district.
It is up to
Okay.
us. Most of our Durg A schools offer U.S. history in the junior year. We were kind of one of the exceptions, so this brings us more in line with
More in
them.
line with, I guess, so far, okay.
Can you just, in a thumbnail sketch, what will the new sequence for most kids be?
It's far more streamlined than it used to be. So freshmen will either take world history or humanities. Sophomores will either take civics and the contemporary world. This is the vast majority. A handful will take AP European history. As juniors, students will either take U.S. history or AP U.S. history. And then as seniors, it opens up. So all of our electives are area studies courses, which had been graduation requirements, are now elective courses, as well as sociology, among others.
Okay, so, but is civics still a graduation requirement?
Civics in the contemporary world meets the old government requirements, so we decided for sophomores we wanted to keep students with the same teacher for the whole year. So essentially, civics in the contemporary world, we're getting half a year of government and civics,
Yeah.
and the other half of kind of world history, contemporary issues.
And those students who are in modern European history, is there another way, is there a way to
So-
opt out of civics is sort of what
Well,
I'm getting at?
no, because as seniors, they would probably be taking AP government.
Okay,
And if they didn't take that, we're still going to keep the old semester-long government class on the books in case there's students that need to take it.
okay. And I appreciate that sequences need to change, and the course that was presented last year sounds wonderful, and I'm sure that moving U.S. history to the junior year has some advantages. I am just questioning the area studies courses, only because as we talk about global interconnected society, where does that go? It's a little different to me than world history, so I'm just wondering
Good
where does it go? And we can embed it in other places or come at it from different angles, but I'm just wondering how you've thought about that.
The thought process was world history would engage students in classes that were not as specific as an area studies. We're still going to offer area studies, but it's going to be based on student interest. So if students sign up for it and there's enough to run a class, we'll continue to run the class, but it won't be a graduation requirement anymore. So the thinking was freshmen will get that global experience rather than just looking at Russia, for instance, with Russian studies.
Okay, I mean, I understand that they'll get it in a historical kind of context. I'm just wondering if it's enough. It's just a question, that's all. And again, I don't know that area studies is the answer either, but when we talk about a global interconnected society, all right, so at the high school level, what does that look like in terms of the global understanding?
Well, the hope too is with our civics in the contemporary world class, the
Okay.
second half of that class is really going to be focused really from the Cold War to the present.
Okay,
And sophomores and juniors would have the opportunity to sign up for an area studies course as an elective if they.
If they
so
want,
choose.
if they had room in their schedule, they would probably be able to do that, yeah.
I think it's a good question, Debbie.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Let's take
good
some time to
question
think
too,
about it.
yeah. That's something that came up at long-range planning. You remember one of the tables got bogged down with that. Were you at that? No, with that very thing. Like, what do we
Right.
mean by
Yeah, global interdependence.
independence? Yeah, I think we're sort of fleshing that out, but like
right,
to
and
me,
it's
I'm
probably
like,
fresh in my mind because of
Yeah.
the mission statement, and we keep hearing.
because when I
global
think of it, I think
stuff.
of it, as like the digital component of it. But
Right, and that
And-
could be
and
another
then
way to do it. Yeah,
this
so
was an interesting.
I just think it would be helpful just to articulate how we address it.
Do you know-
Not that we can't change area studies sequences or that that's the answer. It's just let's not forget it, or let's highlight where else it is.
Yeah, it'll certainly be a composite approach. Fran, I'm sure, is chomping at the bit to respond
Yeah.
to this.
Okay, all right.
Just following up on today's workshop of digital media and global literacy.
Okay.
Global literacy is a very big component that needs to be basically embedded throughout all different content areas. It is something that we think about being part of, world history and U.S. history, but it actually is something in today's world where students should be conversing with classrooms from all over the world and having those cultural understandings, different perspectives, and being able to work with others regardless of, where they live or where they are.
So for
Thank you.
example, in some of the transdisciplinary units that are being developed and rolled out, there are experiences embedded in those where kids are working through technology to connect with others.
There's a Global Inventors project that we're working on right now in 5th grade, where students are going to be speaking with other students in Africa and speaking specifically about resources and lack thereof in their areas, and helping to problem solve, for example, an energy resource issue that they may have there.
Great. Any other questions on the U.S. history course?
Is there anything, oh, one more, sorry. Is there anything different about it than is currently offered? How are you?
Well, we're planning to meet in the summer
Okay.
it hasn't been updated in so many years.
Okay.
Of course, teachers have made adjustments during that time, but we want to make sure that going forward, we're more unified than ever before as far as what's being delivered, the assessments that are being given, and that kind of thing. Trying to use more performance-based assessments, using a UDL model.
And you're using the same book,
Yep, same book.
but you supplement that with.
Oh, plenty of primary sources and things like that, yeah.
That's,
We
I guess,
don't,
the
we
good
don't, I
thing
mean, we
about
have the
history,
book,
you don't-
we use the book kind of as a resource, but it's a lot of kind of teacher curated materials as well.
How much latitude do the teachers have, and who monitors that?
We've tried to ensure assured experiences. And I think there was a time when there was a lot of latitude and maybe too much. So I think right now the work going on in our instructional effectiveness teams around a common curriculum and calibration of experiences and sharing ideas and thoughts about what's working is important. So I think there's still some creative license with our teachers. We don't want to restrain them or constrain them too much.
I understand.
But the idea that if you have a number of sections of the same course, you want the student learning outcomes to be certainly very similar. So I think we're going in the right direction. But I would also say, I think there's a lot of creativity that we're seeing with all of those teachers and some of our newer teachers that we hired. So I think we feel pretty good about where we are right now in the assured experiences. And
Yes, so we've talked about the teachers don't have the right to their own personal curriculum or their own personal assessments, but we work together to make those assessments, so I don't feel like anybody feels as though they're being kind of forced to do something they don't believe in or anything like that. We're very collaborative in my department.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
okay, Christian will talk about the exciting new computer programming course.
Well, thanks for giving me the chance to make this proposal tonight. I'm proposing a course that is continuation of the AP Computer Science. Sorry, I'm looking.
This is the data structures.
Right, this is
Yes.
the first one in the packet.
The title that we can't
This is-
understand.
Right.
Data
I know, I'm gonna explain the title to you.
Yeah, so is that better?
You don't
Can
need
you
the
hear?
prerequisite for the class.
I clearly wouldn't be enrolling in this, okay.
So the course is a continuation of the AP Computer Science A course that I currently teach, and it's called Data Structures and Algorithms. And just first two reasons why I think it's real important to offer this particular course is that computer programming is a very marketable 21st century skill, and the job demand rate is 4 times as high for jobs that require these skills than other types of jobs on average in the state of Connecticut. And I also think it's important to offer a course like this because I believe it aligns with the district's goals and visions to give students the opportunity to learn those 21st century skills in a student-centered setting that uses technology, obviously. The student enrollment in AP Computer Science A has more than doubled from last year, from 15 to 37 students. and there'll be 25 of those 37 are not seniors. And there's 3 additional students from last year's course who will still be at Wilton High School next year. So that's 28 students who will have no course to take next year should they continue their computer programming development. And I think that's unfortunate because a lot of these students have a passion and they also want to pursue a career or academic degree in this field after high school. The class actually will look at different data structures that are available when you're making a computer program, comparing and contrasting those to choose the one that might be best for a given situation by analyzing the efficiency of the algorithms that are associated with them. And that is a pretty typical follow-up to a first semester college course in computer programming. So once the students acquire these knowledge, I intend to have them investigate or create a piece of software towards the second half of the year that aligns with their interests, that will allow them to prepare themselves for more rigorous college computer programming courses, or if they're not going in that direction, to incorporate computer programming in whatever academic pursuit they are interested in. I cited a number of statistics in my proposal from credible sources that state that the thought on computer science education in public schools is overwhelmingly positive from all stakeholders in the community, and also that there's a lot of tangible skills from computer science education that can transfer to other subjects, such as increased work on critical thinking skills. And just finally, I'd like to end with a quote from the Connecticut State Department of Education's Computer Science Implementation Guidelines for 2018. They encourage schools to offer additional secondary level computer science courses that will allow interested students to study facets of computer science in more depth and prepare these students for entry into the workforce or college. And I hope with your approval that this is the start of a more robust pathway for the students that are interested in this subject at Wilton High School.
Great question.
If there's an AP computer programming A,
Yes.
is there a B or a C?
Well, there used to be, 10 years ago, you know how calculus has an A, B, and a BC?
Right.
There used to be an A and an AB.
Okay.
But in 2009, I believe, the College Board cut funding for 4 or 5 courses that year, and that was unfortunately one of them. But obviously, computer science is no less relevant today than it was then. It was a monetary decision, I believe, on their part.
Is there a thought on the College Board about bringing it back or redeveloping it or redesigning it or restructuring it?
Not to my
Really?
understanding.
I'm surprised.
Well, I think that one of the reasons was a lack of qualified educators in schools to implement that rigorous course effectively, because that was in 1 year. That was basically both courses in 1 year. And also the number of students taking the AP test, which was small compared to many other AP tests.
So this course as it's proposed would be the next step from programming A.
Yeah, it's similar to how in math we offer multivariable calculus after calculus BC to give students who have fulfilled that requirement an opportunity to go forward and not just be stopped because there's no College Board approved AP course for that subject.
I didn't see in your proposal, and excuse me if I've overlooked it, what other Durgay schools do for their same kids.
For most of the schools that I had talked to, because I'm a part of the Fairfield County Math League, and so I
Okay.
see a lot of those math teachers, they offer AP Computer Science A, and then some other computer courses, maybe a computer graphics course, which I think we may have something like that. But in terms of this specific course, I know that West Hill High School, who's not in the DUR but in the county, they have a pretty comprehensive computer science program, and they offer a course like this, but it is not a typical course that's offered currently.
So this really fills a niche.
It certainly could. I would just, I feel bad for many of those students that
Passionate
if
about it.
they want to go on and they're only in 10th grade right now,
Yeah.
that they'd have to wait 2 years more till they get to college to continue in a classroom setting. Of course, they can study independently as well.
Other questions?
No, just certainly, obviously, if fills a need, a void that we have an obligation to, I think, to our students in today's society to provide. I really do. I think this is probably of all the most exciting thing from a student perspective. And it's really Excellent.
And like I said, I hope it opens the door for more students and more courses in the future if there's interest there.
Yeah.
Well, you had me at the title.
You ready to sign up?
And I actually love to hear that, we sort of run out and our kids need more.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that great?
So
Yeah,
I
that's
just think
exciting.
that's a testament to our program and our kids. Can you tell us a little bit about who typically takes this course in terms of not just grade level, but are these the high-flying math students? Is this instead of math? Is this got nothing to do with math?
Well,
And then how are the genders balanced or not balanced?
well, in terms of if we want to talk about the math component first, I believe all the students are also taking a math course at the moment, so they're using it as an elective. After I taught it the first year, I found that there were students that were below the math requirement that was in the handbook for a year or two ago that were succeeding, so we lowered that bar to incorporate more students in the program. And so there's students at the moment, from a level 2 algebra all the way up through multivariable calculus. And last year we had a student in geometry too that did quite well, because it was her passion. So I don't think that's necessarily a barrier if they are interested and have a passion.
No, that's great to hear.
We have students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade at the moment.
In the AP course?
Yep. Gender-wise, it's heavily male, and I would like to diversify as much as possible, and whatever I can do. Last year I went with 2 students, one male, one female, into a number of the math classes to promote the course and to give everyone a sense that it doesn't matter what grade you are, what math you're in, as long as you meet that requirement. Male, female, it shouldn't matter, because we can all be successful. But I would be certainly open to ideas on how to balance out the genders within the course.
We've also spoken specifically with the school counselors and said, we really want to make sure we're really promoting this course equally, including the Project Lead the Way courses as well. So STEM education for all students is something we're really striving for. Yeah.
Other question? Oh,
Is this something that you need to take computer science for, or you can it's sort of a standalone as far as take the A1 in this?
Yeah, I would say in almost all instances, we would want them to take the A course first.
But computer science, and I'm sorry if I'm not
No.
100% up to speed on all of the curriculum, but I was understanding that computer science was a separate course in addition to what this is and what the A course is. Is there a third?
Oh, I think that there might be a semester computer course in business. Is that what
We have
she's doing?
and a program, and the regular programming course in business as well.
Yeah, it's one semester,
Okay.
I believe.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
I just want to briefly commend them, because we were one of those schools that were struggling to find a quality and qualified teacher. And he came through the back door of my office one day and said, I'm interested in teaching the AP computer programming course. I minored in it, and it was just as if it were a gift. And look at the enrollment figures now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
It's a lot of fun.
Executive functioning, our very own Patty Berkowitz.
Good evening. My name is Patty Berkowitz. I am a special education teacher here at the high school and also co-instructional leader for special services at the high school. There is a true need for an executive functioning course at the high school. The course I'm proposing meets that need for many of our students here in the school. Executive functioning is made up of many discrete skills. If you think of executive functioning, the function is sort of the director of an orchestra, and the skills are the subsets, all of the different components you would need to put together. You'd need the woodwinds, you'd need the brass, and those are the skills that we're looking to teach our students. So discrete skills in the area of executive function would be things like inhibiting, shifting, task analyzing, prioritizing, organization, working memory, emotional regulation, and control. These are many skills that are brought to light, especially in my role, that students are lacking, and they're skills that are necessary in terms of post-secondary success. So the course looks to target specific skill instruction in those areas to meet the needs of our students.
Question?
Well, this is sort of goes along with the bold moves for schools in terms of, I think I think the workshop would call it the antiquated days. It would have been called something like study skills or how to outline.
Yeah.
And this is so much richer and more supportive of students' current needs. So I think that's a great move.
How many students will be affected? Do you anticipate enrolling?
So, of course, I'm hoping enrollment is through the roof. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that it will be. The courses will be open to any student at the high school. We want the course to be accepting and open. We are hoping for really would love for 3 to 4 sections of 12 students. I'm thinking that as the course is taught, enrollment will grow, similar to other courses. We need to remove the stigma that this may have in terms of executive functioning weakness. It's viewed as a deficit area, and we want to remove that stigma and show students and parents that it's fine. It is a weakness. It's an area we can improve upon. And we can teach skills to meet that deficit area.
Do you envision having students recommended for the course?
Yes, I do. That there will be some special education students that will be recommended through the PPT process,
Right.
but that it will be open enrollment for any student during course registration.
Okay. Question?
Do you feel that that each student sort of gets a, like specific needs for what they have? Like some students may have needs in one area versus some others in another area?
Through the course?
Yeah, through the course.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the course would look to do a pre-assessment in the beginning and then a post-assessment at the end that would look to show students their performance in each of these discrete areas. And then each unit would be taught, so students, even if it's an area that's not a deficit for them, they would have exposure to the skill set, but they would then better be able to plan and set goals for themselves in terms of their deficit areas.
Anything else?
A question about, and again, I'm not critical at all, but if you could help us understand the rationale for a class size of 12.
So I think executive functioning and executive skills need to be discreetly taught.
Okay.
And it's almost very personal, because if you think about your working memory or your executive, your emotional control or regulation, those are very personal things. And I think keeping a lower teacher-to-student ratio is very important to meet those needs in the classroom, as opposed to having a class size of 25 where you couldn't have some of those more immediate conversations that would be more personal on a personal level.
Right. So it's really got to get at the profile of each individual in depth.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. I just want to make sure that we all have that understanding.
Correct.
Because sometimes, we say, oh, can't have small class sizes, and sometimes you absolutely need them. And
It would be
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kim and Dan, for your leadership.
So we're really excited to be here to present the peer leadership course. It's something we've been talking about for many years now. Right now, Peervention is an after-school club, which students are recommended into, but we find it hard. Kids are not able to openly participate because of sports and other jobs and other type of conflicts. And we think we can do a lot more with it being embedded in the curriculum. And it's not just a leadership course. The whole idea behind Peervention and the peer helper piece of it is that kids go to kids before they go to adults with issues. So if we can skill up our students to be ready and armed with the information they need to help those students get to the resources, we're going to be able to impact a lot more students. So we feel we can do a lot more with it as a course during the day. Overview.
And our hope is really to spend a lot of time with the students working on resolution of conflicts, team building with them, communication skills, active listening, time management, strategizing, all the things that you normally do with leadership, but also spending a lot of time with them on developing mentoring skills and interpersonal skills. We currently do mentoring at all of the schools right now. Currently, we're not doing any one at the the youngest levels, but we are working with 3rd and 4th grade and 5th grade. We're working with part of the RAMS program right now. We're running a 5th grade group, which will start shortly, in a girls group. I'll be going into the classroom with 5th graders, and we'll be going in very shortly with a 4th grade group. So we're doing that. We have students mentoring students in the high school as well. But our program right now is 5 after-school sessions that we do, plus 2 all-day retreats. So we're very limited to what we can do. And I think by having a program similar to Danbury, to pieces of what Greenwich does, pieces of what other high schools do, that we can really enhance the skills that we're giving our students. It's always frustrating that we run out of time. When we interview our students to come into the program, they then look at what they're doing in their lives, and they just can't do it. Or they'll try to see what other pieces can we do. So we try to find other ways to incorporate them into our different programs, but they can't commit to the large program like a peer helper. And we think this is a great opportunity for them to do it. And then take the skills that they have and just enhance their skills. And use also our skills that we have. Mrs. Dunaj is also a part of the program, and she's very willing to help. And we know that we can give the commitment to this.
Questions?
Can you help me understand how it's going to be staffed?
It would be the 2 of us, plus Christina Dunaj, and some shape, size, or form with Christina. We haven't figured that out yet. But we're willing to give the commitment to our day.
So will this require additional FTE, or this is embedded in your normal?
It somehow might jump.
Well, not that you have a normal day, but in your regular day? And you feel you can handle that?
I wouldn't have said yes.
Okay.
That was part of the planning.
All right. Am I right that this is every day for a semester?
We're looking at doing 2 different semester courses. The first one would be grades 10 through 12, and the second semester would be 9 through 11.
But one section.
Or I think I may have said that wrong. But anyway, yes, 2 semester courses.
Okay, for
Yeah.
different kids?
Yes.
All right. And credit earning and?
Yes, half a credit.
And I don't know that it matters that much, but what as electives, as?
And many of the schools use it as an applied arts or a life skills course,
Okay.
whatever. I know that our curriculum is looking at some kind of revision as well, our school curriculum. So I don't know where it would fit in, but in some of the systems, it's right next to marketing. So.
Okay, all right.
So I think that's where we could fit in wherever is the most appropriate.
No, I thought it's creative, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole it.
Yeah, no.
But I am sort
Well,
of
that's why I was looking
wondering.
at where it would fit in, but they do give it half a credit, and it fits
Okay.
in one of those categories.
Have you pitched it to any of the students yet? to find out if there's
I
interest?
actually have, just you can't read it, but I'll hold it up. Our current student officers have decided that this would be a great way to go, just because they know there's so many things that we only just barely touch on, that because they spend so much extra time with us talking, that we expand on so many of the topics separately. We have night meetings that we do, and a lot of times we've brought in guest speakers to continue what we can't cover in the training sessions. And especially when we're doing the mentoring, what happens, the students will then come back to me and talk about, how do I handle a situation? So I think that would give me, as a classroom teacher, so much extra time to help the students do the what-if kind of discussion.
It also gives us the opportunity to use those students to then facilitate discussions and presentations through health and other options on some of the skills that they're learning, since we have them during the day, rather than having to pull them out of other classes. So we think it will give us more opportunity to put those kids in leadership roles without overstretching them. I mean, I think that's the issue we run into, is that their kids are so overstretched. They want to commit, but they can't because of all the barriers of the different things that they're doing, and embedding it during the day will allow them more options to use the skills and practice those.
And Kim, can you share, in addition to that, the other ways in which these kids identify themselves to the student body that they've been trained, so that they are somebody that can be approached?
Yeah, the teachers have a list of the students.
There you go.
There's an email address that
There's a
students can
brochure.
use.
Oh, thanks.
There's brochures that go out to let students and staff know who the peer helpers are.
And that brochure was handed out at the club fair as well, so all students know. If you walk down guidance hallway, there's a bulletin board with their photograph, and that information's there as well.
Right.
What we're hoping to do also is, in the past, we had a peer mediation group as well, and we'd like to incorporate these students as part of that program. That was good. We also see ourselves working with the mental health certification as well for these students.
So this really is a more formalized extension of the peer intervention program.
Right.
And I think it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so needed. And I mean, to the extent that we can get closer to our students and our students get closer to their peers, it can't do anything but help. And it's, I think, vitally necessary. So.
I think it's brilliant embedding it in, turning
Yeah.
the barrier of the school day into an ally by embedding
Exactly.
it as a course.
Yeah.
I think you'll see, you'll get the numbers,
Yeah.
and they'll go miles.
Anything else? No, I know, thank you for taking it,
Yeah.
already very full schedule, so, thank you.
Fran Compar has offered a very robust digital literacy course. Fran.
So thank you, first of all, for actually getting to this point. When I started a couple of years ago in proposing the digital learning plan for the digital learning initiatives, one of the things that I was very, very much committed to was to have transition courses at the 6th grade and the 9th grade level. And we did, in fact, last year, begin a digital citizenship course that's now offered to all 6th graders, which has been very successful and very important to the teachers as well as the students. And as we started looking at this, Jackie Whiting, who's one of the library media specialists here, and I began co-authoring this proposal, which basically talks to the digital media and global types of literacies that we have been discussing. And I just want to read a quote because it comes out of a study that this was actually based on. In 2016, Stanford University did a very well-publicized study in which basically they say that young people's ability to reason about the information on the internet can be summed up in one word: bleak. Our digital natives may be able to move between Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, texting at the same time as posting selfies, but in fact, they really do not know how to actually analyze media and use it well. They can use it. Some of the things that came out of it was that they mistook ads for news. They thought that just because results came up on the top of a Google list, that they were better and more trustworthy. And they were duped. They were duped by phony photographs. They were duped by different types of stories out there. And they were duped by simple things like charts with lots and lots of data because the data looked like it was important. Therefore, they never asked, where did the data come from? So as a result, we really need our students to be able to be media literate. And going into the high school, we have this issue where they're at a much more sophisticated level of using technology than in earlier years. They now can use social media sites, 13 and over. So how do we actually produce citizens that actually can be interconnected globally through technology? And what we're saying here is that we need to instruct it, and we need to instruct it by people who have the expertise in this area, which happens to be our library media specialists. So this particular course would be offered to 9th graders as a transition year, as a media literacy type of analysis, not only for critical analysis of media, but also using media to create. And so as a result, we feel that this is a very important offering, and I hope that it is considered as something that we can offer to our 9th graders.
And just to be clear, it's not just an offer, it would be a requirement.
Well, that's going to be my question.
I just
No,
wanna-
I think we require
It would be
it.
required
Yeah, it's
of all
required
9th
of all
graders, as we
Of
do
all
for
9th
6th
graders,
graders.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a semester-long, one semester?
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a semester or it's a full year?
It's a semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we want to be able to do is we do have 2 library media specialists, and thank you, that was something that we were able to add within the last couple of years as part of the digital learning initiative. We also knew that we wanted to be able to have something where we're teaching the students directly these skills. So because of that, we'd be able to keep 1 library media specialist who would continue operating the Learning Commons and being able to be available for students and teachers at the same time as offering this as a direct instruction.
I thought we had talked about the possibility of a quarter.
It depends on how we, yeah,
So it could be a quarter.
it could be a quarter or a
But is that
semester.
enough time? Can you do everything you need to do with it? I mean, this is so critical. Can you get it all crammed into a quarter?
It would be more difficult to do that way.
Yeah.
I think that what you're seeing is that what we're doing with it is that we're going from, looking at bias and critical analysis to actually having students create something at the end, a passion-based
Right.
project as it seems. That project could take longer or less time depending on how it's scheduled. The semester would be better.
Obviously, this is a tremendous, great idea and very much needed. My question is, I see we have the impact on scheduling in terms of staff scheduling, but our students are already so rigidly scheduled. How do we fit another requirement into their already
So-
loaded schedules?
Sounds familiar, huh?
So there are a lot of possibilities right now. Truthfully, up until this point, we've been talking about a quarter course in the digital literacy and trying to figure out a way where all of our freshmen could get that course earlier in the freshman year so that they can apply these skills in their daily lives and across curricula. Right now, with the current schedule, if it were a quarter course or like modules, we'd be backing them up against science classes, which could be a challenge because right now our freshmen, we do have some pullouts, if you will, or flight modules that they're taking. And so with the current schedule, it could be a challenge. I think we have a lot of logistics to work out. We've been brainstorming, which is to say Fran and Jackie and I and Pam, Scott, and Don, about how to make this work for all ninth graders. I don't want to go too much into it right now, but I think the board may be aware that we're doing a deep analysis of our current bell schedule, how our day is spent, our instructional minutes. And depending on where that goes and where it lands, and we've got a big week next week in terms of some professional learning around teaching on longer blocks and some people coming in to present to us, there could be a shift in the bell schedule, which could create an opportunity for a better opportunity to offer this course to all ninth graders. We've also been brainstorming, and this is purely along the lines of brainstorming and visioning. Is there a way, if this is a quarter course, or if this is even somewhere between a quarter and a semester in terms of the scope and sequence and the content, is there a way to really design a quality learning experience for the freshmen that incorporates skills in digital literacy and then some of the skills that we're right now teaching in the flight course? So, the Strengths Explorer and Skills Inventory and Learning Styles Exploration, some of the executive functioning skills that students are working on in the flight program, beginning a thoughtful analysis of the college plan and where students are as freshmen and where they aspire to be, throughout the four-year sequence and what they want to do post-secondarily. So there's a lot of possibilities here, none of which we're committing to right now. It's the idea of how do you schedule this for all ninth graders when most of them take 7, when they also require some study hall and downtime, when almost all of them are taking flight, when some of them are in either reading or math intervention. There's a lot going on, and I think we've got to try to find the balance to equip students with the skills that they really, really need without challenging or overstressing them too much. So I think we have a lot of thoughtful conversations and work collaboration ahead about how to make this work.
The puzzle.
So there are some moving pieces that are in play right now.
And I was just thinking, I was wondering if there'd be an opportunity with the 8th grade curriculum, library media curriculum, towards the final quarter you get it started there.
That's a
And
good
then it
idea.
continues at the high school, so it's kind of a shared
yeah,
class
yeah.
between the two schools.
So right now, at the middle schools, staffing would be a little bit of an issue
Okay.
because of the fact that we do have the sixth grade that's
Right.
that's already in place.
Right.
We'd really have to think about how that would work.
And the sixth grade class is throughout the entire year? It's not
Yeah,
just- okay.
it's quarter, but it's
It's quarter by
throughout the year.
quarter,
Yeah.
okay.
I have a thought I'd like to just share. This is such a timely conversation. Debbie was speaking about the team's work today with Heidi Hayes-Jacobs and Bennett Kallick. And so here again, we are operating inside a set of 150-year-old structures.
Mhm.
Right? We have not extended the school day. We have not shifted other requirements. What excites me about this work in particular, but a lot of the work you've heard, and I think it responds to the key question that was posed today in this group, and that's, what are the needs of and the demands on contemporary learners today, and to what extent does our whole program respond to those needs and demands? And I think if you just stop and think about that, you can come up with a number of ways on a quick list of how we're not. Because our system, public education as a whole, has not shifted structurally to keep up with the new demands. And, Heidi Hayes-Jacobs today made an impassioned plea to teach explicitly skills in digital and media literacy, and she's equating this to the importance of learning to read and write, and I think she's on point with that,
Yeah.
because our students, all of us, are just overwhelmed with so much information in today's society. So I suspect that as we come forward with a course like this, pending board approval, we'll launch it in a given way. But as we really get more involved in thinking about how we can shift structures to better respond to kids today, this course will shift in the way that it's delivered. Some of the content, I imagine, will be embedded in other units and other in other curricular areas. We'll have different opportunities through interdisciplinary lessons, and maybe some of those other demands that are currently in place won't be there, so that'll also free up time and space for some of our learners.
Interesting, yeah, you're right. Interesting thought.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be a way to use the ninth grade schedule to an advantage somehow, whether it's through the common
Right.
course requirements that are already there, or the changing potential schedule, or somehow we got to think out of this box a little bit. But it's in great hands, I think.
I think so. If anyone
Well, I
can do
think-
it.
And then I was going to ask a question about this sort of, leading up to a project where they actually produce media. And this gets to something else. It's always dangerous when I go to a workshop. But, the idea of transdisciplinary and projects and not making any experience sort of like totally in a vacuum. So when you talk about their passion projects, I still think perhaps maybe there's a way of, yes, it needs to be student generated and student chosen, but can there be a link to another course that they're already taking?
Absolutely.
And then teachers can sort of partner in this course to some extent to say, all right, when it gets time for you to do your project, here's some, let's think of some possibilities within social studies or English or math or whatever it is, and get that cross faculty stuff and the students seeing, oh, the Library Learning Commons connects to my classroom.
Right,
So
right.
just try
In a
to
sense,
network there.
it's very similar to, what I call reflective collaboration, where when you don't have the ability to co-teach in a collaborative type of effort, what ends up happening is that if you know what's going on in the other courses as a teacher, you can actually gear students to be able to choose those types of things so that they're actually happening simultaneously in more than one class. And you are, in a sense, collaborating with other teachers because the students are actually working on that. So any time of the year, this could be an opportunity for students to actually have choice in what they create for projects, let's just say. Because they have that support from the Learning Commons folks that are helping them through creating that media. Yeah.
Well, it strikes me, and Mr. Willock, no offense intended, okay? Because your course is a standalone by itself, it's history and it's different. But the other proposals tonight, as I read these earlier, they're today's world. They're dealing with real world issues.
Yeah,
Our
good point.
students, you know, the reality they live in, and it's a computer programming world we're moving into, your media skills, social and emotional well-being. The other four are all related. We just have to find some way, somehow, of delivering to them. We owe it to them because the need clearly is there. I mean, I don't think anybody would doubt that or could defend that the need isn't there, because I think it is across all the four other proposals. History is important, and it's a passion of mine. But the other four are just so, in today's society, and as we're moving and we're talking about in our mission and our visions, I mean, this is what we have to do. We've just got to find a way to make these things work, and if it means there's something stuck in our 150-year-old, discipline that we just have to somehow have the strength to say, it just doesn't need to be there.
It won't be U.S. history.
Well, no, it won't be.
You're okay.
Yeah, it won't be. But they are just, for today's students, just so critical.
Yeah.
Every one of these proposals are so necessary. And, anyway.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing these.
Thank you.
These are great
Thanks for your
proposals.
support.
all your
Thank you.
work.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's why it's so exciting to be on the teaching and learning committee.
Next up, yeah, really,
Bob was just finding out now, how do we do it?
policies, nothing.
Yeah, policy, I'm sure, is just
This is
as
so much
exciting.
more fun than budget.
Yeah, tell me about
Well,
it.
it's
yeah.
because it's what we do.
Should do field
The
trips.
budget allows us to do what we do.
Yes,
but this
I know, I'm
this
not
is the
saying it's
core of
not
what we do,
important,
so
but it's a lot more exciting to talk about
It
in
sure
many
is.
ways.
It sure is.
The revised vision statement.
We've been finding
So I think those course proposals are really a brilliant segue into this next conversation. So we took your feedback after the September board meeting and went back to work and produced what you see here. As you know, we put this in front of the long-range planning committee as well. And I think what came through were a great many ideas. And so the challenge for us has been, how do we get really concise and impactful in simple statements, but not lose sight of some of the other really big important ideas, critical skills and attributes, et cetera, that we want to ensure our students walk out the door with. So we reorganized this body of thoughts around a mission, a vision, a set of values, a series of promises, and then that final piece is what we're describing as a portrait of a graduate. And I would say, we had a portrait of a graduate embedded in our previously approved vision statement. And these are, again, some of the, of a list of many. The attributes we're saying are most important for our graduates. And what I would say about this is it remains incomplete, and this would also serve as a springboard to further develop, what each of those pieces look like, and then how we address those skills and attributes through our program. So I'll stop, and really I'm looking for some continued feedback. My goal here is to get this in a place where you feel comfortable enough with what's in front of you that you can vote to approve it, because I consider this really the foundational document that we're going to refer back to as we continue to entertain new course, other changes in the program, and certainly financial decision making, et cetera.
First question, if this is as it was when it was presented to the Long Range Planning Committee, or is any changes been
No,
made?
the draft has not changed
So this
since
is the
then.
same we worked with the
Right.
other night? Okay.
Yes. Yes, and we have that feedback from the long range
Right, you still
planning
have all
group.
that,
Yes,
so nothing
correct.
on here has been changed since then.
So what's your, I'm sorry, Larry.
You go ahead.
What's your schedule for having the board approve this?
So I don't think, I guess, within the next 2 to 3 board meetings,
Okay.
I'd like to have you feeling really good about what's on this document. And I think the feedback that I heard by and large from that group last week was that we're pretty close.
Yeah.
I recognize there's some key ideas that you may want to put on the table to make sure they're explicit, but I think we're close.
My takeaway was that it's just kind of wordsmithing some of it. I think we're very close. And the wordsmithing, not so much the mission, but in the vision sense, because of all the ands in there.
Yes.
And I would propose that perhaps, just for thought, guided by expert instruction of a rigorous learning-centered curriculum, instruction of our students actually pursue their goals and aspirations, growing to be productive and resourceful members of their community.
Oh, so you deleted
Take
some
out
of
the-
those ands.
Yeah. Change the first and to an of, instruction of a rigorous curriculum, okay? And then the aspirations, growing to be.
Great.
I guess just for whatever. That's a pass.
All right,
Whoever
so
chose.
I'll go through my few points.
Please go ahead.
My very first one is, that I got hung up on for some reason, is the positioning of vision versus mission versus, and which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because I even look back to our agenda and it says revised vision statement. But yet, the first thing I see on here is mission. So talk to me about,
Sure.
does it matter? Should I just get out of that paradigm? Or was this
I think-
purposefully done this way?
It was purposefully
Okay.
done this way because I would say, in order, a mission statement, right, it kind of describes what we're about. And I would say a vision statement describes where are we going, or
Right.
that to which we aspire. So I see that order as logical.
That makes more sense to you,
Yeah,
and, okay,
it does.
as long as
Yeah,
it,
same here. Yeah.
I mean, I'm cool with it. I mean, I've always looked at it the other way, that the vision comes first and then your mission within that, but I'm good with that, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Just with
What else
something.
do you have?
The other thing I have, in the vision statement, as it relates, I still felt, and we spoke about this the first time it was presented to this board, that we have to remember, above all else, we're an educational institution, and therefore our curriculum has to meet and/or exceed all standards in the academic world that are set. I mean, that's our number one goal, I see it, is to make sure,
Right.
so just if there's another adjective or something added in the vision statement, learner-centered curriculum that is, that meets or exceeds all academic standards, something to that effect, but I think that needs to be very explicitly stated somewhere here, because I think ultimately that's what we're all about.
Yeah, our hope, so I think one of our struggles with trying to put these together was, number one, beyond capturing accurately what it is, who we think we are and where we think we want to go, we also wanted to put together a set of statements that people could remember. And so there's been a real push and pull about, what do we add? And so consequently, the word choice matters. So I guess what I just heard you say, that was expressed in the concept of having a rigorous curriculum, right? So the assumption is there, so I get that it's not stating explicitly meets or exceeds standards, but when we say rigor.
Well, I don't know if it's maybe one of our promises or,
Well-
somewhere, it has to be something that says to the community, we are a public school system whose academics meet and exceed all standards.
I come to that in the mission statement with Wilton Public Schools, educate, inspire, and prepare.
Where does it say educate?
I add that word.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Like,
I
that's
was gonna
what
say,
I
what-
come to, like, what is the mission of a Wilton Public Schools? Well, we're a school system, we educate.
Right. Well, again, I just think that, again, maybe it's just me, but I just feel it needs to be very explicitly stated somewhere that we are a public school. And, and having worked on the PTA for so many years and then on this Board of Ed now for 9 years, I think it doesn't hurt to remind people that this is a public school system.
Yeah.
Because in
point.
this community, it's hard to, sometimes very easy to forget
Mhm.
that we are in fact a public school system. So, so I don't know, and it's our identity of who we are. So that was.
So are you getting at the, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Sort of the excellence quality concept?
No, I
No, I'm just,
simply
when you
wanted-
said,
yeah.
academic stand, I mean, again, we are known
Right.
for our academic excellence, so
Mhm.
is that what you're trying to get at, right?
Right,
Yeah.
something, but something
Yeah.
that speaks to the academics.
Right.
Because that's not really mentioned.
Got it. No, you're right.
I mean, it's mentioned curriculum, rigorous, but, any person can define rigorous and, that can be,
Yeah, I think that the important work here will be how we define it.
Right.
And that's the work that's, I mean.
but I
it's-
want the
it's-
next board that follows us
Well, you
to
could-
have a common understanding as to what our definition of rigorous was. It's
Well,
the
you
same,
could say
yeah.
academically rigorous,
Just
throw it in.
by extra.
Or like
Just
sustains
saying.
education, something like that, right? Drop a few ands and add a couple academics here and there.
Right,
Then
Okay.
the last two things, I still struggle with the stewarding the environment. My subgroup at the Long Range Planning Committee, we had a long discussion about what environment are you talking about? Because when I first read that, I wasn't sure if they were talking about the classroom environment, school environment, community
I thought it
environment,
was green.
global
I
environment.
got it.
That physical environment.
And everybody
That's what I
around
was
the
thinking,
table
it was
had a
green.
different definition. So again, just
Right.
something that can be wordsmith it in such a way that there's a common understanding no matter who reads it. I don't,
Right. Would
And,
you-
and I thought, and just to piggyback your group and my group,
had the
we
same
were,
discussion.
yeah, but
Mhm.
sort of like saying there's nothing wrong. I mean, it's
nothing
admirable to
wrong with
want
it,
to
right.
steward the environment, but there are other wonderful social causes too. So how do we not get entangled in world peace
Mhm.
or the cure for cancer?
Or world hunger
I'm for
and all
both
that
of
stuff.
those.
Yes, I mean, we're all for
Personally.
those. So, so why pick, I guess the question is, why
Right.
pick out the environment?
Right.
And if so, then
Right, sure.
help
I
us
mean,
understand it better.
I think we can make an argument about.
So maybe change the word stewarding.
Well, I would push back on that only to say that as humans who are living interdependently and interdependently in a world, we have an obligation to ensure that the world is habitable for future generations. And I think there's been lots of research recently to suggest the importance of that dimension of our work. And I think, too, perhaps more locally to Wilton, I've seen over the time that I've been here that this seems to be an emerging feature and value of this community, the commitment to conservation, the commitment to green efforts, certainly here recently in our schools, but across the community as well. I think that was part of the reason why the woman who was attracted to Blue Zones was so interested in bringing that to Wilton as opposed to Norwalk or Darien or someplace else.
I think when we came up with those, we went back to the motto here for a better world, right? So you brought up world peace, you brought up a lot of things. I think those are incorporated in strengthening community, embracing diversity. But those things don't talk about the issue of making the physical world a safe and healthy place for everybody. So I think that's what we're thinking. I don't think it embroils us in anything that the other things don't embroil us in, if that makes any sense.
One of the commitments I made at Long Range Planning was to send this back with annotations, which Chuck raised his eyebrows at me, like, what do you mean by that? But as I've been thinking about that, right, I mean, words have meaning, and these are all value-laden words. And so, Laura, to your point previously, what I'm imagining is, as whatever set of words we commit to, if those live on our website, I would imagine hyperlinking each one of the adjectives, to an explanation.
And I do think that, as I said at the Long Range Planning, this is skeletal. Each of these things needs to be explained in much more detail. And my hope was that Long Range Planning would help us to flesh
Right.
these things
Right,
out.
of course.
Well, and I like in a way that we are condensing in terms of the words here, and then of course they can lead us to the whole world and beyond. But I think I mentioned it today when we were sitting at lunch, that under values, like Lori was saying with the academics, there's no valuing academics or scholarship. You want to bring joy to it, which is great, but the it is, you've got to get the intellectual scholarship, academics, whatever.
Intellectual scholarship.
Well, I don't know what the word is,
word.
but
I
the
think
concept.
when you said this
Scholarship.
earlier, scholarship,
Good
and
word.
I think that's where these conversations I
Yep.
find so helpful because, I've lived with this pretty intimately now
Yeah.
for some time, and so consequently, I'm making assumptions
You've
about the
memorized.
words, right? And so when you say, "Where is this?" I look and say, "That's right." So it's a no-brainer to me to name scholarship as a value because it very much is a value.
Yeah. And so last, under Portrait of a Graduate, so I was happy to see, the first one there, possesses a
Knowledge.
broad court, so you get to the academics there, but my table group discussed the absence of wellness and discussing the overall wellness of the student
That's what
in the
I
portrait.
added.
Yeah, and I think that came up in the discussion at the broad discussion, as all the groups
Yeah.
presented, I think more than one group presented that idea.
Right,
I
and
recall.
I just jotted down like lifetime commitment to health, or nutrition committee,
Yes.
health and wellness.
Of course.
Well, and then,
Plug for
as
the
we,
nutrition
social, emotional health,
And
mental health, the whole,
social,
Well, wellness,
emotional.
I mean.
whole wellness.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah.
More mental health than physical.
yeah, but all, yeah.
right, and that goes with the promises too,
Right.
so,
It's the very first promise.
right.
Mhm.
And then,
Editing.
Well, the ideas are important, and I think too, as our effort here was to try to pick up some of the other ideas in different places. But ultimately, as a board of education, I think one of the most important decisions you're going to make is agreeing on
Yeah.
what are our values, right? That sets the stage for everything you do, and the rest of your governance decisions ought to lead very clearly back to this. So you have to be comfortable with what's being named.
And to what, I remember Chuck discussing with the group, saying that, it was really hard to put together one vision statement that incorporated everything. So breaking it out into the different parts like this became easier. And so there's value to that. However, I also think each of these portions needs to be able to stand on its own, too. So if you're talking about wellness under promises, if you have to repeat it again under the Portrait of the Graduate, I think that that's okay. Because I think each of these segments should be able to stand on its own, too.
I also think there's a difference between our commitment to safety and wellness of the students is different than the students committing
graduates.
themselves
Right.
to long-term wellness.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with you.
And going back to this is a public school, I think the idea of citizenship is
Oh, right.
not explicit, and
Right.
that's just something that's important.
So the
I-
values, that's another
I feel,
value.
yeah, I don't, where you put it or how you say it, but if there isn't something that, we generate responsible, just something about citizenship, and
Yeah.
again, I leave it to other people to wordsmith it and where to put it.
Yeah, it's
But,
like democratic citizenship.
Yeah, it comes with responsibilities and knowledge and attitudes and all sorts of stuff.
How you conduct yourself
Yeah.
as a member
Just
of
being a good citizen,
society.
following the law.
Right.
I think our conversation earlier today, we were capturing some very American ideals, which I would say might not be the same thing as global citizenship.
Right, we
Right,
live
there's
in
some corresponding concepts, but
we live in a democracy,
Yes.
so, and that implies a
yes.
certain type of citizenship. And public schools, in my
Yes.
view, it's not an antiquated idea to go to today.
That's
Actually,
right.
I just want you to know, there's a difference between antiquated and classic. We're
Okay.
going to move this into the classic.
This is classic, yes. Timeless.
Classic as in timeless, right.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's it for me.
And then my only wordsmithing is number 2, under promises, learning experiences are, add the word challenging, or, just,
Got it.
No,
so
good.
it's, it stretches kids rather than, because the stretch part isn't in there.
I think this is like our our group.
Little our baby here.
Fourth pass at this. It's probably like your
200.
40th.
Yeah, 50th. And I think the good thing is we're all going to have ownership of it when we're done.
And that is the hope.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say,
And we're getting close.
generally speaking, my group at the Long Range Planning Committee, I think felt really good about this versus where we were in our very first meeting when we looked at our current one.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the feedback that I got.
We read the current one in
your group?
In our group. Brian read it. And it was like, wow. So
We've come a long way, right?
long.
So what?
Long.
Well, I think that's what's nice, is that I think the mission and the
author likes
vision
to
can be
compound
Yeah.
stated. Like, we'll be
People
able
should
to
be able
state,
to remember
I
it.
mean, regular people.
Without it, right.
Not the people
Like
who
in
live
one
and breathe it.
sentence versus
Yeah.
a whole paragraph, right?
Yeah, the day is coming when we need to just put, the stake in the ground and say, this is it, guys. Now let's get busy with it.
Right.
Okay, we got it.
Get busy.
It's
So
coming.
what's
It's
your
fast. Okay.
approach?
So I think next step, I will
Chuck's one.
come back to you, right? You
Yes, we will.
And so we'll,
Next week? Are
Uh,
we going to see this again next week?
we have a board workshop next week.
yeah, I'd like to, we will do the best we can. I think we can, I mean, because I just,
We're close.
by
We're
volume,
so
from
close.
we
Yeah.
are there.
So close.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of step one. We owe some annotated information back to the long-range planning group. I think if you were comfortable in a place where you could put your imprimatur on it before we went back to long-range planning, I think that would be
That would be
a
very
very good
helpful.
thing.
Yeah.
Because then that just shifts the work a little bit so we can get into now operationalizing.
So you hope that by the time we meet again as a long-range planning group, this will all be approved and voted on by this
Yeah,
group?
which would, I'm thinking, I was hoping December, I'm thinking January more realistically.
Do you think that that's what their expectations were, or do you think they were thinking they'd
Well-
get another pass at it before we
Yeah,
voted
'cause I was
on
thinking
it?
I
we'd
think
be
I
the
left,
last
we would get
stage.
another pass.
That's what your
where
group
I
was
left
thinking, that's
thinking.
what
Yeah,
my
you
group
were
was
in the
thinking
room.
too.
My
Yeah, I think
takeaway
that's the
from the
expectation.
feedback was that people were feeling okay, with a little bit more explanation. But I would defer to you. I think this is important. So if your preference is one more go with that group and then
I would just
But-
remind everybody
Yeah.
of what Glenn said.
When
At
is
some
that
point, we
meeting?
have
That
to
meeting's
stop
not
this
happening for a
wordsmithing.
it won't be
Yeah.
I'm thinking of January.
Well, and get to the work.
Forever.
Yeah, and start
Definition of
living it.
eternity.
Yeah.
And living it. and doing
Again,
it.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
not, so here's, I guess, I'm not uncomfortable with that timeline for a couple of reasons. One, I think the work's important, and I
Yep.
think we get better at this the more we sit in the stew. But we're also not talking about radically diverging ideas that need to be negotiated.
Right, I think
No.
Where this is a
Wordsmithing.
process of
everyone
refinement.
agrees on
Mhm.
the meat. It's just sort of have a,
Well,
Season it.
I was just thinking in terms of process, though, that if this is I see this as a culmination, the approval of this. So I really would like to have it go through everything. And it doesn't have to be overly long. But I just think that when the board approves it, that it represents all the work and all the thoughts. That piece is, it's now a bow, we're putting the bow on it and
So it
sort of
would be
taking
nice.
the public stance. So I would rather do it
So it'd be
after a long
And I think
range.
that's what that was my perception, that the expectation of my
That's
group
fine.
was.
See, I would suggest that maybe December would be a good idea to finalize this and make it a shorter meeting so that we can meet in January and begin the work of taking this and operationalizing it. My concern is if we wait until January, we can't get into the work because it hasn't been approved yet. So long-range planning will make some suggestions, we'll go back, we'll tweak it again, we'll bring it back to the board, they may want to tweak it again. It won't get approved till February or March. So I would encourage us to meet in December with long-range planning and try to finalize this so that the board can vote on it earlier
Yeah.
rather than
It's
later.
gonna be
know
tough
that's
in December,
achievable.
though, it's a tough.
Right.
month.
Another possibility along those lines would be just to send it out electronically. and
Right.
Solicit feedback that way.
Right.
I think, why don't we,
Okay.
if you don't mind, Chuck and I just talk offline about some of the logistics,
Okay.
about how to meet the pressure of the timeline
Yep.
and honor the.
right.
input
I
of the
would agree,
community.
though, that I think the long-range planning's expectation is that
Okay.
they were going to have it.
Shut up.
Yeah.
All right.
One
Do you
more
think if we did this virtually rather than try to schedule, because I really think that December is going to be a heavy lift to get people back into the room.
I think it would be very hard, and I think if you tweaked it based on the feedback you got tonight, put it out there that says, this is where we are after considering all of your input. If there's anything very specific you want to share, send an email back. Otherwise, this is the document that's going to go to the board for approval. But at least they got a chance to see it and provide feedback one more time before it came here.
That works.
Right, right,
Right.
and that satisfies my
Yeah.
need of
The
having this
process,
be
yeah.
the last step.
Yeah.
All right, then I think that's probably how we'll
Okay.
proceed.
Okay. Moving on to the class size report.
Great, so there's no presentation here.
We had this before, it's just all we have now,
Yeah,
so
and
we have
so
a
I
couple of
just
additional things
wanted
that were.
to present an
Yeah.
opportunity. You've had a chance to sift through lots and lots of class size information,
Right. Yeah.
and just a chance for you to raise questions or comments.
So the format, the changes that were made here are much better than, I think it's better than the first pass we had at it, so it's good, yeah.
Yeah, Debbie asked some really insightful questions that
Yeah,
led
thank
to
you,
the
Debbie.
additional kind of repackaging of the information.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank, and there has to be lots of staff members working on this, so I appreciate the time, the effort, the thoughtfulness. There is so much data here
Right.
that can be used, as you plan out new courses, or you want to see what percentage of the kids are in certain levels or strands of math. You want to talk about budget season, you want to look at staffing changes. There's just so much here that I think it's just invaluable, and the fact that it's available, I just think it makes our work. We can, sort of look at facts and look at numbers when we need to, and they're easily accessible. So I appreciate all the work that goes into it. When it gets into budget season and people make statements or have questions, here's another data source. So I think it's tremendous work. And you can look at this with varying lens. Glenn, you had brought up the whole issue of class size. So here's some information, if we get to that, of talking about that. So I just think it's important stuff. I don't have any particular questions or comments right now because I don't have an issue that I can relate it to yet. But it's such valuable information and useful information, as I think we will be able to tie it to other discussions we have.
Great.
So I just want to say thank you for listening to us and our,
This
can
has
you
been-
do it this way?
Erica
Questions.
Cross is,
Yeah.
baby here, so she pulls all of the data and organizes.
No, it really is good, it's so much better.
I would just like to ask, we see how many kids are in each course, like, you see like this, the farm to table, which we just approved. It looks like it has like a low enrollment. Same with, what was it, one of the engineering courses.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised with that.
Aerospace engineering.
How do we, is that what we were expecting enrollment in those courses to be? Like, when we approved those last, I was like, oh, this is a good thing, like, there must be great demand for this at the high school.
When the process starts back when kids enroll in January and February, we create our initial sectioning report. So, for example, the class you just mentioned, Farm to Table, 16 students initially elected that. It's not a very high number, but considering if we didn't offer it, that would get in students who have an interest in culinary arts, right? So they're taking culinary 1, culinary 2, they want a place to go without being done with the sequence. So it's a tough decision, but when 16 kids enrolled, we did section one section of that farm to table, and then some students dropped units with the number you see. And there's a story like that behind many of the courses, and if you have questions about particular courses, we can probably take you through the sequence of how it came to be where it is and how the number came to be what it is. But when we get our sectioning report, we're always conscious of trying to live within our means, obviously, but then also provide opportunities for students. And sometimes you do have tough choices, and you get a course that has a low enrollment ultimately, but it becomes important because it's a pathway for kids who are on a certain trajectory, whether it's in world language or math. That's usually how these things come to be. There's a story behind each particular course. So you mentioned one. If you have others you want to talk about, we could address them.
I was just sort of scrolling through, and they jumped out because I was like, oh, we just approved that.
Yeah.
In aerospace, we committed to the 3 years with Project Lead the Way and with the IED and the AED courses, the two prerequisites, we thought we'd have a cadre of students. I had hoped it would have been higher, certainly. The students who are taking it are having a good experience, but we looked at that and we said, you know, are we going to be able to offer it? The other thing is that many of these courses, not all of them, are either singletons or doubletons. So, you know, you run into situations where students are making choices between, you know, a really comprehensive set of offerings. So that sometimes will impact the enrollments. Some of the lower ones here as well, you know, we went through and analyzed, and I think Mrs. Lowe, that was helpful to print it out that way. We've looked at it different ways as well, but there are a number of these that there may be one section that's lower and then a second section, so it's a doubleton, which is higher. And that may not jump out at you unless you drill down further into into the actual teacher, the way the teacher course loads are. So there's a lot to it.
So you don't have a stated minimum per se?
Not specifically, but it, you know, as Don said, you know, these all tell a story. One of the ones that's enrolled lower, for example, Latin 4, you know, when students get to the point where they've had 3 years of a world language, we recognize they really love Latin. They want to continue on. They want the 4th year for the college piece. The term I use is we just don't pull the rug out from underneath them, and we offer the course. And some year there may be 8 students in there. Some years there could be 11 students in there. But you know, we need to continue to offer that course. There are a number of those here where you know you just want to continue to provide the opportunity to students.
I mean, there are times, there isn't like a bright line test, but there are times where you have to make a regrettable choice not to offer the course because of the numbers that emerge. For example, I would have loved to have offered French 1 here at the high school for students who wanted to start that, who hadn't started at Middlebrook. So we put that out there, but only 6 or 7 kids enrolled in it. I just didn't have the capacity to run it. It becomes then something that you look into maybe doing with the virtual high school or some other platform. So, you know, those instances arise. For all the classes that we have here, we could show you the number of kids that enrolled for the course in the first place, and the history of how it was actually populated and why it was an important enough class to run.
You know, all of these discussions, I think of it in terms of the budget discussion we have, and especially the community conversation. There are so many people who want to make it a very linear discussion about, or decision about, you know, oh, the population. I just saw a Wilton Bulletin article today that said that our enrollment was down 100 students this year versus last year. So there are those who say, well, why didn't you cut 10 teachers? Well, you know, there needs to be an understanding about, you know, this is a people-run business, and it's not a linear decision like that. So that's why a publication like this is very important, and then discussion around this is very important.
And it's also difficult, because it will raise some legitimate and difficult things to talk about. But I think that's healthier than not knowing and going on just things that people assume that may or may not be accurate, and not knowing the story behind something. So I think this could raise, in part, some questions, but let's deal with them.
Yeah, and it's a fine discussion, because again, declining enrollment over the years, we certainly have to plan and prepare for that, and eventually it will mean potentially dropping teachers, dropping classes, whatever, but it's not immediate in that moment necessarily.
Right, and I was struck by, in general, again, we can talk about the extremes on either end, the ones that are on the small side and the ones that are on the large side, but to me, when you look at this, I think kids are in class sizes that are productive, and that, you know, we're not, you know, we are offering that quality experience for kids. You know, when you look at, you know, whether it's a grade level class or a 6th grade class or a high school history class, they're all within, like, yes, this is okay. We can work within that. So I think it's reassuring in many ways as well.
Right, and the high school classes are going to be different than elementary classes as far as
Very much so.
minimum class sizes and that sort of thing, just as we heard tonight with the 6141 presentations. For some subjects, it makes better sense to have a small class
No,
size.
some of them,
So-
So you have to know what the needs are.
Yeah, well, the example you gave of Latin 4, what would you do with Max if you didn't have Latin 4? You got it. He's here. Okay? So it really doesn't
Good point, yeah.
and negatively impact anything. He's
No.
got
He's
the time, he's
willing,
there, he's the
he's got the
teacher,
passion, and-
he's got the passion for it, and you offer it. Otherwise, he's going to, sit around for that hour, or that 40 minutes, and do nothing, wait for the next class that he is teaching.
Right.
And on top of that, students who had gotten to Latin 3, who wanted, were excited to go to the next level would be get in, and so.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes that there are so many broad-brushed statements that are made about population decline, students doing this, that, and the other things. And until you get into the details and really look at the if-then and what if and this, that, and the other, for the most part, you guys do a pretty damn good job of managing your resources.
Yeah.
I really believe that, sincerely, and delivering to our students what they're looking for and what they need. And you could probably get down in there and find some little nit or nat somewhere to make us think about, but for the most part, it's pretty darn good.
Just to follow up, Don, to your French 1 example. So it was offered one time, you only had maybe 6 people. Does that get offered again and
Oh, yeah.
again and again? And at some point, if there's a cohort where all of a sudden you've got 15 or 20,
Yeah.
well, then that's a group that could potentially take it all 4 years through the high school.
Yep.
So it's not just offer it one and done.
No, the
Okay.
students vote, essentially vote a class on or off the docket by how they sign up.
It remains in
And,
our program of studies, is what
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
saying. Okay.
Yeah,
And that's a good example, because for years, we ran French 1 and 2 together. We really wanted to continue to provide the opportunity. It is not ideal.
It doesn't work. That just doesn't.
Not in the introductory levels,
No.
but we did so, and it worked okay. But then it got to the point where even the combined enrollment had decreased, and we thought, you know what, it just,
Right.
so we dropped it a few years ago, and then we tried to reoffer it this year, and in working with Simon and Scott, and we'll try again. And if we have the critical mass of students, we'll offer it. If not, it's just an informed decision to say with the resources we currently have, we can't offer it.
But it doesn't get dropped from the program of studies,
still
right?
an
Okay.
option.
And I also wanted to point out the staffing report. You were talking about enrollment, that's in the very beginning. And you can see over time that enrollment has dropped, but so has staffing. And you can argue, should it be more, should it be less, should it be in different categories? But the idea that there is no response, or that
That there
there's,
absolutely has been a response.
or that, it's going up and all that sort of stuff, that this information shows that in the last 5 years, we have gone down in staffing as well. And this is a good way of tracking longitudinal data. So
Right.
I think that's important. So.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Good stuff.
Thank you very much. And, yeah, again, Debbie, this was a wonderful idea to have the information presented this way, so thank you for that. Next up, review and discuss policy 5131 hazing, 5131.91 hazing.
Right, so the policies that are up for review tonight are both existing policies, and what we're doing in each instance is just some simple language cleanup. The policy committee is ferociously committed to succinct, clear policy statements, and to striking
I think Chris comes to every
flowery
meeting
language
with red pens in hand, right?
that confounds the
Hoping
purpose. So what you have in front of you, this was a policy that the board had entertained a year or so ago, and it reemerged with some just very simple, some language cleanup. And you can, I don't need to name it, you can see it for yourselves. So the spirit of the policy isn't changing. We added coach because that wasn't named explicitly as a role in the first run.
To that, in the 9 years or so that we've been on the board, have we looked at every policy?
No.
We're trying.
How
Oh
far
my
off?
gosh.
How far off are we on that?
Oh, my gosh.
We've got, so I think Wilton's policy manual comparatively is thinner than other districts. So part of the process has been look at existing, but we've also been playing catch up with new policies that were, either written into statute and not adopted, or, were kind of clouded over, embedded in some different policies. So, I mean, there are a few. We tried to go from beginning with the 1,000 series and work our way through, but we keep being called off that task
Yeah.
because of we tend to move slowly, I think.
So how does your group decide, like, for example, how did this come back on the table, this hazing one? Since we did, I don't know where the date is on that, as far as
Do you know what,
last
that was,
update.
some of these policies we
Mhm.
also publish in our handbooks,
Mhm.
and that's been as a parallel process, trying to just
Okay.
clean those up. And I think it was in looking at that, the
Okay.
language was there, and it was just noted, so we brought it back, because you can't change in the handbook without actually changing.
So
the-
otherwise, you've
the
just been systematically going 1,000, 2,000.
Well, a lot of it's driven by the legislative changes.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
I would say we spend the majority of our time on mandated policies, suggested policies. Last year, we decided to do a hate speech policy,
Mhm.
which was unique to Wilton. Next week, we're working on like a revised volunteers policy to reflect our new fingerprinting policy. I'm going to suggest that we discuss whether or not we need a policy on student, political activities within the buildings, or whether or not that's already addressed in
Mhm.
controversial, this controversial subjects policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, hazing was just done 2 years ago.
Okay.
But there's,
Is that what it was 2 years ago?
I
Okay.
mean, if you scroll through the policies, there's some that haven't been touched since
Yeah, a
like
long time.
1995.
Right, right.
Yeah, the other, so there were kind of, three, I think, veins. One was to work methodically
Mhm.
through the series. The second was to respond to the CABE audit and recommendations
Mhm.
that came through. And then the third was to respond to new state statutes.
Right. Okay.
And that's given the policy committee about a lifetime's worth of work.
It's all good, though.
It's just that, we see, I'm thinking, oh my God, we must have gone through all of them by now, but.
Well,
Even after, like, we're termed out, we're
We'll still leave a few for the next
For the
board.
next board, when you guys will come back.
Okay.
We'll feel like your guests. We're off. We like those are your guests.
I got confused on the next one. on the
the
attendance.
regularity of attendance, so there's a policy and then an accompanying regulation. So you may be looking at the regulation.
Well, the regulation, everything on the front page got lined out, but nothing changed on the other pages.
So so let me start with the policy, Glenn, and then I'll
Okay.
jump into the
Yeah,
reg.
'cause
just
that
so
one-
you
this one I found confusing. I was
Follow
trying to figure out what
yeah,
was
and
going
that's the reg, because we're wholesale changing the regulation.
Okay.
That's why that looks that way. So again, this was in part word cleanup, but also to make some changes to catch up with statutes. So for example, in the policy, we had a reference to the juvenile justice system. So prior to a year ago, if a student was truant, a district had the capacity to file a petition for service needs with the local court. That's no longer an avenue that's open to us. So now the law changed. We can refer to a local youth service bureau, and so that would be Wilton Youth Services in this town. So we're amending the policy to catch up with the change in statute. The regulation, was just really dated, and it didn't track with changes to State Board of Education guidelines. So I've struck all of the old language and wrote in all new regulatory language that conforms to State Board of Ed guidelines, as well as our current practice, which is aligned to State Board of Ed guidelines.
So then this is the open sentence, the open paragraph on the back of the first page.
Connecticut state
the
law
sentence
requires parents to
starts
cause
on the
children.
first page.
On the first page,
Yeah.
very
So it's
last.
with very
No,
last,
not on mine.
Connecticut state law requires.
Yeah, it's the first line of the
Yeah,
regulation.
it's not on his thing.
Oh.
Did you
No.
print yours off your printer?
No.
Okay.
All right, I see now. Okay,
Yeah.
that explains it.
Yeah, and then it lists
Thought we'd
out.
start in the
Oh,
middle.
We just want to make sure you're awake, Glenn, and paying attention.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to figure it out. It
And
doesn't
what
make
is,
any
what are
sense
the
to me at all.
highlighted in yellow, which
So
is not
those
on
were,
yours either?
I had questions that I kicked over to Kim Zemo and highlighted this. The highlights didn't come off in the review. So
Okay.
when it's
Oh,
approved, there will be, well,
okay.
you don't approve a
We don't
regulation.
approve the
You just
regulation.
approve the policy.
Yep.
But that was,
Okay.
I had questions
Got it.
about, in some of the old language, it was, 2 days in a month. The state guidelines are 4. So that was my note to Kim Zemo to just fact check for me.
I know that we don't need to weigh in on the regulations, but it seems like we're still talking telephone and mail.
So,
Is there anything for
well,
electronic communication?
yeah, email, we use.
It says the required mail notice. I mean, and again,
We do snail
could
mail when we hit the threshold.
And that's the only way to do it?
No, I think we use ourselves, we use all of our communication tools, but there'll be counselor outreach, I mean, that's telephone, you're trying to make contact, but the written letter is the practice, I guess.
No, I'm not saying there
Required.
shouldn't be, but
Yeah.
sometimes somebody will come back and say, I didn't get it in the mail, so therefore none of this none
Yeah.
of these consequences apply.
So you're-
Where if you give yourself more
Certified or
options,
signature required.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so let me just
Certified
under, so
registered, you got delivered.
just amend the statement to ensure that it's flexible enough
So that
to
if
meet
you
our
don't get,
communication vehicles. I
right,
understand
right,
what
that
you're
it, that somebody can't come back and say, since you said
Never
mail,
told me.
and even
Yeah.
though I got counselor da-da-da-da-da,
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
count,
yeah.
I didn't get it in the mail. I just, sometimes if we limit ourselves to one, then
Got
it
it.
has to be that one.
Yep. Makes sense.
Anything else?
So these will be on for approval next week.
Okay. Moving on to the financial report.
So Anne sends her regrets. She'd hoped to be here with us. So she did share a financial report. She'll be here next week. I would just say, this is, the first September report. It's early on in the budget cycle, and we are tracking. So there are no major variances. Barely any variances at this point.
Okay. Moving on to our one action item for tonight, which is to discuss and approve the building action plans that our principals presented to us at our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Can we
We're
discuss?
going to discuss after.
Okay. Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, discussion.
All right. My only comment was, first off, that was a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, a ton of work that they put forth and to develop those plans and all. The one thing that struck me was I just don't know that the goals are stretched enough or high enough. To go from 71% to 75%, that's 4 students out of 29 you're going to improve. And that was the only thing, when you think about it, 100 students, it's 71 that made it last year, your goal is to now move that 71 to 75. You still have 25 students that aren't performing. And that just didn't strike me as being, and across the board, I always saw the school, it varied a little bit. But that's just not hard, not strong enough, not aggressive enough, in my view, okay? To reach 4 more students, a whole year's worth of effort. Come on, we can do better than that. And I'm not, it's just my only comment.
But that's still while maintaining.
Oh, of course, you better maintain.
70 to 72.
Oh, no, come on, no,
Yeah, right,
that's,
yeah,
no, you
yeah.
gotta maintain.
Right.
I mean, no, you can't go back. Well, sadly, we have in a couple of cases, but you shouldn't. But to make that just seems to be just a very modest level of improvement.
What we've
That's
said
just
to
my
the
opinion.
principals, Glenn, they've done, and I think you heard it in the
Hey,
presentation,
I
some
did,
really
yeah.
deep
I know.
analysis, and
Yeah.
they're looking at cohort growth as opposed to year-over-year growth, and so, we have, 3 of them here that can speak for themselves and why they chose those goals, if you have some.
Oh, I know, they did, and I think if you look at it, that's just, they're more into the weeds than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, can probably offer great explanations.
I would join you in the disappointment in where the scores are today.
Yeah.
But I would argue with you that those aren't stretch, because they know what's in place, they know the students, they know the staff, they know the programs.
Yeah, oh, I understand, and I get that. I'm just saying, my reaction was that it just didn't seem to be aggressive enough. Because you go from 71 to 75, it's like, huh? Still 25 students.
On a test that doesn't belong to us.
Yeah.
Right, or around specific items that we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I would say.
I got it, I get it.
It's the state measure that we don't have control of.
It's just my reaction.
Yeah, fair enough.
I
On
would
the table.
also add that I know we want to see dramatic changes, but in a large, complex organization that's human service oriented,
Oh.
incremental changes can add up over time, and I think they're more sustainable.
I hope you're right. And I hope now, 5 years from now, we'll have that other 20%, we'll be at 95. Okay?
I think that's the plan.
That's funny. Well, we've been at it now for whatever. Anyway, that was my only
We're moving
reaction.
in the right direction.
Okay.
Well, I wonder a little bit about the process. You know, you said it's a lot of work, and so I just want to make sure that these action plans are value added for the staff. You know, when we pick out, or when they pick out numbers, and then we argue whether it's enough or it's not enough.
Right.
Is there I just wonder if there's a better way of capturing that continuous improvement goal without getting into should it be 76 or 78 or 72 when you want the rising tide to happen. And I don't want to overestimate tests either. But I have to push back a little in that the new standards and then the tests were supposed to be aligned. Now, if they're not, then shame on the tests. But if we believe in the standards and if the tests mirror them, then I think that we shouldn't sort of disavow ourselves. Because in a way, while we don't control it, on the other hand, if we believe in the standards and that's what we're moving our kids
I guess
towards,
to be clear about that,
Yeah.
what I'm talking about is the kind of feedback we get
That
from those
yes,
results that we
yes.
can then turn around and make really actionable. We don't get good student level feedback from the SBA, so that's why we use measures like the MAP, because that we can drill down to.
Yeah.
unit level
Well, I just wonder if you
experiences.
could put improvement then, instead of 71 to 75, to get at your point, you know, we want to improve decimal understanding or fractions or,
So-
whatever.
But we don't get that.
Yeah,
We don't get that level
to
of.
the
of-
scorecard, and
Yeah.
when we crafted
Yeah.
the scorecard as a monitoring tool,
You're right,
we
you're
were
right.
looking at
All
aggregate
right.
measures,
Yeah.
and even in the plans that the principals developed with their staffs, we selected particular measures. So I would say some of that other work, that's happening in the buildings, because they are, to the extent that they're able to, drill into some of those discrete skills, because they have the information, pertaining
Okay.
to their students, and teach into them.
The map
Yeah.
tests seem to
It
be a
doesn't
good
distill
tool.
up to that broader.
Okay, all right, so maybe we're
growth
not
measure.
totally happy with that tool. 'Cause, I
Yeah.
share some of Glenn's frustration, is it meaningful to go from 71 to 75? It doesn't sound it, but my guess is it's a big deal, or it's a substantial deal, and
Any child that
It's
we
just
can get
hard.
to grade level is a celebration, right, even if it's a few. One of the things I think we need to think about is maybe we need to supplement the scorecard with the growth measures from the map. Because when you're looking at
Okay.
who meets, it's binary, they either made it or they didn't. When you dig down, the level of growth that
It's
many of our kids are
struggling.
showing isn't reflected in that binary. Is that
Okay.
making sense?
Yeah.
yeah.
So
okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
if we would like to revisit the scorecard to see whether or not we want to add growth measures. I do try to incorporate that in the testing report.
Mhm.
The growth of our students is good. We started pretty far behind, and it's taking us a while to grow to the point where more kids are meeting
Right.
grade level standards.
So-
But you don't see that when you're only looking at, second, fifth, and eighth grade, who met standards and who didn't.
One of the recommendations that when we meet in retreat that I'm going to make to the board is to give some further consideration to how the board monitors performance. And so that might be the point of the conversation where we talk about what are the measures and tools we have, what do they do and don't do, and what are the ones we want. And we might be able to come back with even some different thinking about how you all engage with that performance monitoring.
Yeah, and maybe
Well-
that's our real question is,
That would be really helpful.
Yeah, well, the disappointment is that, there's so much importance, so much value, or not value, but importance put on these test scores and how we're doing. Yet with the scores, we don't get the data or the details that would help us improve them from the
For
state,
some.
for a lot of it.
The state mastery test does not provide us with a lot of details.
I know,
One of the
and so-
reasons why we do the benchmark.
Yeah,
stuff.
so we get the score, everybody holds it, wow, but then we don't understand, they don't share with us, well, what is it you're lacking? What didn't we do, or where are our weak spots that we can improve upon? And how do we, and so that's really frustrating from the state's perspective, that
I
they're not
think their
giving.
position is they don't want people to be teaching to the test.
Well, I understand that,
So
and
they're
of course
very
not, you don't.
cautious. We get a lot more information from the CMT.
Yeah.
The SBAC, we don't get as
Yeah.
much information.
Well
My-
said.
yeah,
I'm done.
My only question, and I guess it goes to the principals, this is a very long, very tedious process to go through and to create these action plans. So once they're finished and once they're approved tonight and all of that, are these plans helpful to you to have these in place, and do you refer to them often? Are they like working documents that are part of your daily lives? Or is it just something that comes
Right,
off the
exactly.
shelf
Good
once
question.
a month or every 6 months or
Or every
when you
time you have to
present
come
it
back
the
to
board?
us.
What's the real update? Right, is it only done,
Is it
to
just
give
for
us a
us, or
show?
do you
Because you
use
could
it?
do a
Right.
talent show instead, if it's just to entertain us. I just want to know that
Yeah, that's a
it's
good
serving the
question.
purpose, that they're meaningful to you.
It's a great question. They're a live document. We actually, what you see isn't exactly what we end up with at the end of the year. I think you guys have seen that. We make modifications and meaningful revisions as we go through the year, as different needs come up, but they're absolutely live documents, really kind of like our roadmap
Yeah.
to our improvement. So.
And are you constantly pulling it out and referring to it with your staff and?
Yeah, so like
Okay.
at different levels. So we have, each one of us have like a leadership team that we really look to review all of the data when we start up school in August, and it's kind of gets kicked off then and kind of goes throughout the year.
And although there might be new things that are added to the document, a lot of it is just building upon what we've done previously. So when I started this process with my leadership team, and we went through the, collaboration section and the assessment all those sections, there was so much they wanted to do that we had to say, so what will we do this year? What will we probably put in next year? So when we wrote this year's, it was much easier because it was like, oh, they were already like 6 steps down the road. So don't think that it's like, oh my gosh, these are just brand new things. It's it's the next logical step. So that's why it's also a living, document. And they came up with it. If we sat in a room and did it ourselves, then it probably would end up on a shelf. But because they contributed to it, it's very different.
It probably gets easier year after year to do it because you have a foundation that you're working with. And the next year, it's just an expansion or extension of what you've already done and what needs to be, what did we do well or not do well. So it certainly is not easy to do, but it becomes perhaps not as difficult to do. Year after year after year, once you have some years under your belt of doing it. And you need the roadmap.
Yeah, I think we give you guys updates a couple times a year too. don't we?
Yeah. And Bob wanted to,
I shared our whole plan with our whole staff, and, regarding the 2 academic goals around the SAT, I think it helps to outline explicit steps that we think may help. I don't know that it's inspirational to our math and English and social studies departments. I'd like to think it's a bit aspirational. A lot of the work I think they would otherwise be doing, but I would say our student connectedness goal, we unpacked that during a recent faculty meeting with the entire faculty and laid out the steps, the explicit steps, the goal, the improvement from this percentage to this percentage. We outlined the new plan and the processes around, you heard me explain how we were trying to have the students really define and inform our work around and connectedness and get the student perspective. We had the opportunity to have teachers talk about what they feel is going well right now and other steps that we can take. We've begun to engage in the focus groups. So I think that's an example where we're really trying to say, this is our school community. This is all of us. This is all 1,200 plus students. This is every staff member trying to get buy-in to say, collectively, we have to engage in this connectedness goal. So I thought that was an example where we said, you know what, we have to really build some traction around this and try to move the needle. And to Glenn's point, every single student that we can build that connection with and forge, that's important. So I view it a little bit differently now, just in terms of what we've done so far between the 2 academic goals and the connectedness goal. I mean, we're really trying to focus our work on that connectedness goal right now and get everybody to buy into it.
Anything else? Are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The action plans are approved. At this point, I'd like to remind everyone, we are meeting again next Thursday. And at 6:30, there's going to be a community budget workshop out in the high school library. We encourage all members of the community with an interest in the budget process to please come. We're going to break into tables, and there'll be board members and administrators at each table. So members of the community, if you have anything that they want to contribute, please, we encourage you to come. That's your opportunity to have a say as the budget is getting built. And then our board meeting will follow right after at 7:30. So the board meeting will start a half hour later. So we hope to see a lot of members of our community here at 6:30. At this point, is there any member of our public audience who would like to come forward and offer any comments? Seeing no one, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.